Let's get to your top 5 takeaways, Rod. The Cowboys. We just were there. We watched the Cowboys, the Minnesota Vikings. Kind of a weird game to pick without Dak. What's your temperature right now on the Dallas Cowboys? Cooper Rush, they find a way to go get a win.
Man, when we talked to Amari Cooper, we talked about the level of talent. You and I, we talked about the level of talent that they have. And I was looking at the talent on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line is ridiculous. I mean, the offensive line, absolutely no weaknesses at the O-line, running back, quarterback, the wide receivers are studs. And think about Cedric. Think about Cedric Wilson, a guy coming in for Michael Gallup. He's played well. He's helped take pressure off Amari Cooper and those guys. So I like what they're doing. This is probably the most, and Amari Cooper said it. He said this is the most talented team that he's been on in 7 years of playing in the National Football League. And I would have to agree with him. They are loaded.
Yeah, Rob, we thought Amari Cooper was kind of shy or whatever. We're like, man, I don't even know what he's going to be like in this post-game interview. He was awesome, man. His personality was shining. The way he was giving away some things about Dallas. I was like, I really felt like I got a good picture of that team and Mike McCarthy coaching that team. Let's play a little bit of that post-game interview that we had right there on the field with Amari Cooper. Here's what he said about the 2021 Cowboys.
What is it about this team that makes you guys believe in the fourth quarter that you can pull out a game like this?
Man, we just believe in the guys that we have. We preach that neutral mindset. No matter how the game is going, we're going to stay even kill. And like I said, we believe in the guys we have. We believe in the talent on our team, the way we work, and we just come out here and prove it every week. The thing about every great team that I've noticed, whether I was in Pop Warner, whatever sport I was in, depth. You have depth, you're going to be successful. You see our quarterback went down. Coop came in, made some big plays. We have corners go down. I mean, Michael Gallup isn't even playing. You saw Sed with that huge touchdown. We have a lot of depth. We have a lot of talent throughout across the board.
And, Jack, what was interesting, man? I asked him a question about Mike McCarthy, and from the media standpoint, so many people give him such a hard time, and he had his coaches back. He's just like, look, I love Mike McCarthy. All he wants to do is win. All he talks about is winning. Everything that he does is based on winning football games. And I was really shocked to hear that. I thought maybe he would say something else. I didn't know that he was going to come to Mike McCarthy's defense like he did. They love that man.
They do. And you got to say, man, like he went through a lot because his first year in Dallas, when some people are already saying that's a risky hire, that's not the guy they should have brought in. They lose Dak Prescott. They have a slew of injuries. Offensive linemen are hurt. Everybody's banged up. And he's got to hear all that noise the entire season, then the entire offseason. But Dak Prescott comes back. And in week 1, I mean, this team was ready in week 1. They went toe-to-toe with Tom Brady, the Tampa Bay Bucks, a unit that was basically returning their entire team. And I just thought that they went right there with them. And ever since, they've been playing even better. Now they go get a win with their backup quarterback. And I think Amari Cooper made an awesome point about the depth. And the big thing for me is this team was built around a great offensive line. And they hadn't had that for a few years. So Zeke's numbers were going down. They weren't running the ball anymore. Life was harder on Dak Prescott. Now the offensive line has returned to dominance. And all of a sudden, you better look out, man, because the Dallas Cowboys look like they may go compete for championships with the way they're playing right now. And that was without even having their star quarterback in Dak Prescott. I thought it illuminated how talented this entire group has become.
I thought that, Dak Prescott's injury, I think it really affected Ezekiel Elliott. I really believe it affected him because he came back a different guy. He was focused, and I think he realized that he had such a great opportunity not to take advantage of this opportunity that he has, because he's such a great player and coming in out of shape and things like that. But when you see a good guy, and Dak's a good person, when you see him hurt and you see his ankle twisted around and you know that this guy loves football, it affects you. And I think it really affected Zeke. It humbled Zeke, and it made Zeke come back better than he's been in years.
Yeah, and you can forget about teammates, too. Those two are just best friends. I mean, Dak and Zeke, those two are best friends. So you can imagine just having one of your best friends go through all that. Let's get to your second takeaway, Rod.
Hey, Zach, let me just say this last point about Zeke, okay? And I have to make this point. When you watch Zeke at home, it's really not – you can't really tell how big and how aggressive and how physical. But we're on that sideline, and that last run that he had, it was just incredible, like how hard this guy runs. He is a big, thick dude, and he runs and he gets stronger and stronger. I just had to make that point because watching him at home is completely different than watching him on the sideline, and just how big and how aggressive and how physical he runs.
I think that's a really important point. But for one reason, because Amari Cooper's getting a lot of the credit for that final drive, but who had that big third down? Who had that conversion where he caught it well short and broke those tackles to go get it? You better believe it was Zeke. He gets a ton of criticism. But I also thought throughout the course of this game, the Vikings knew the Cowboys wanted to run the ball. They had a backup quarterback. They wanted to run the ball. And guess what? Minnesota could do nothing about it. And that gives you some idea about how good this running game's become, the offensive line and the backs. If you know we want to do it and you still can't stop it, that reminds you of what the Baltimore Ravens are. Let's get to Tennessee. Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry now going to miss a long time. Just had surgery on that ankle. What does this mean for where the Tennessee Titans go from here? Because they were very hot coming into that game.
Yeah, when you lose your best player and you lose a guy of this caliber, this really significantly hurts your team. Because, I mean, you lose that fear factor. Not just the physical fear factor at 6'3", 240 pounds, but every time he touches the ball, there's an opportunity for him to go 40, 60, 70 yards for a touchdown. And defensively, you don't have to commit the 8th guy in the box anymore. You know, they signed Adrian Peterson. Think about it. If you can keep those safeties back and worry about Julio and AJ and
A.J. Brown, yep.
A.J. Brown, I'm sorry, A.J. Brown. When you can keep those safeties back and worry about those guys, and you don't have to worry about coming up and hitting a 240-pound back, that's huge. That's going to change really the nature of their offense. And I think this is a huge blow for them.
It is. So you got to look at who's able to step in, right? So it's Jeremy McNichols. Jeremy McNichols, he's a practice squad guy. He's bounced around everywhere. He's out of Boise State. He's played for about 8 different teams. I don't think he's going to be an answer. I mean, the drop-off from Derrick Henry to McNichols is – yeah, he can play, but he's no Derrick Henry. And then you have a 36-year-old Adrian Peterson, over 3,100 career carries. That's a lot of highway miles over a 15-year career to try to carry that backfield. It's a problem. Like, I think the point you're making is Ryan Tannehill has been a really good quarterback and a really underrated quarterback and really played awesome within this scheme. But when teams start game planning to stop their passing attack as opposed to Derrick Henry, what does that mean? And maybe he'll still be able to go play like this, but it's going to be an entirely different feel the way these teams are trying to go now defend the Titans, knowing that they don't have their ace coming out of that backfield. Now, he may come back. We may see Derrick Henry for a good playoff run, or, you know, this season's an eternity this season. He may still come back, but they got to be able to make it there without him, and I think that's still up in the air because he has carried this team for years now.
Yeah, and I think Ryan Tannehill, they'll put a little bit more pressure on him to probably make plays with his legs because he's a very athletic guy. We saw that in Miami.
He is.
And whatever he has to do, whatever he has to do to make those plays, I think he will do it. But it also affects the defense. You think about the defense. It keeps them, when you have Derrick Henry, it keeps the defense off the field. Okay, so now your defense is on the sideline, they're resting. Where as opposed to the other defense, they're getting physically beaten up, you're wearing them down, running the football, and now you can use the play action pass. The other thing about their offense too is Julio Jones is hit or miss. Is he going to be healthy? This is every single week. Is he practicing? Will he practice? Is he healthy? Will he play? And that's going to be a big problem. You can't have Julio in and out the lineup and not having that chemistry with Ryan Tannehill, and then all of a sudden you don't have your star running back as well. So I think Ferkshire and those tight ends, they'll be a little bit more involved. And let's talk, and then the defense. There's going to be a little bit more pressure on the defense, obviously, and they're playing a lot better.
How quickly things change in this league, man. Like last week, we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. We're talking about the Tennessee Titans. The Bengals lose to the Jets. The Titans lose Derrick Henry. Now they got to go into L.A. It's just this season can change like that after just the historic start that Derrick Henry was off to. Let's get to New England. Bill Belichick, every time he goes up against a rookie or an inexperienced or a young quarterback, he always just gives them nightmares. So how does he do it, and how did he do it to Herbert this week?
Well, we saw it with Zach Wilson. We saw it twice with Zach Wilson, just what he does.
Oh, yeah.
And just the emphasis that he puts on disguising and bringing pressure. And I was watching that tape a little bit, and he kind of copied or pulled some of those pressures from the Baltimore Ravens game. He had a lot of 6 and 7 man up, where guys were in those A gaps and looking like they were going to blitz, coming out of it. And Herbert looked confused. He did not look comfortable with all those different looks. He just didn't. And Matthew Judon, he has been the star of this defense. I remember we were out there against Tampa Bay, and I had a conversation with him. I told him, I said, you got to be the driving force. They paid you a lot of money. You got to be the energy. You got to bring it every single game, every single practice. And he looked at me and just said, yes, sir. And he's balling out, and he's been a difference maker. It was good to see. There he is. Adrian Phillips, former Charger, get 2 interceptions and a pick 6, which ultimately changed the game. But the Patriots defense, they're getting better. They carried the offense. Mac Jones didn't have a great game. He had an efficient game. But this defense will have to carry the Patriots right onto the playoffs.
Yeah, and it basically comes from Judon was the best player on Baltimore's defense consistently, right? And Bill Belichick was just sick of going up against him. And he said, forget it, I'm just going to pay that guy and bring him over. And I feel like Belichick never wants to pay anybody. Like, he never wants to write that big check. So when he does, it's going to be somebody who is going to make a huge difference. Like, I think about Stephon Gilmore getting that check. Even though he wound up being underpaid by the end of his contract, he got a big contract from them, and he did some amazing things. Judon gets a big payday. You're thinking, it's going to be another one. Sure enough, Judon's having a huge year for him. Let's get to your fourth takeaway. The Bengals, a rude awakening. Just mentioned it. The Jets, guy had to go back and watch that game today. It was something watching Mike White just go off on that defense. Why could this be a good thing, though, for Cincinnati?
Well, I'm going to read you a quote by Joe Mixon. It actually kind of got my attention. He said, no matter what, we have to have our team ready to go. Today, we just weren't ready. We came out flat. They wanted it more. That's just what it was. To me, that speaks directly to the head coach of not having them properly prepared. Zach Taylor, come on, man. You know your team is a young team. They haven't been very successful, and you have to emphasize, guys, we're going to practice extra hard. We're going to meet extra just so you guys won't take this team for granted, and that's exactly what they did. And to me, it's the players' fault as well, because they got so caught up in believing all the headlines. Oh, Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in the league. Joe Burrow is this. The offensive line is playing well. The defense. They have to forget about the headlines, and they got to stay focused on the task at hand.
Here's the thing about Cincinnati right now. They can beat anybody and they can lose to anybody. I think that's the big headline when you look at the Bengals team, is that it's that consistency. It's that young team. But, I mean, they should have beaten Green Bay. All they had to do was make a kick. They lost to the Bears when the Bears were in just a dumpster fire. They lost to the Bears. Now you go lose to the Jets when they don't even have Zach Wilson. So they can beat anybody. They can lose to anybody. You mentioned Joe Mixon. I want to call him out a little bit, because if you think about this passing game and the emergence of it, it's really become one of the premier young passing games in the entire league. Joe Mixon, he hasn't had a 100-yard rushing game since week 1. And I understand he does some things out of the backfield, did some things out of the backfield against the Jets this past weekend, catching the football. But they got to be able to get this running game churning, because going for about 40 yards on the ground puts so much pressure on Joe Burrow. And I think over the long run, over trying to put together a playoff run, it's got to go through Mixon more as the weather gets worse and worse, which it will here in Cincinnati, already is. Believe me, I got my coat sitting right next to me. It's a dumpster fire out here from a weather perspective in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so
it's why I'm looking at condos in Florida. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, it must be nice. Let me ask you this. So do you believe that it's Mixon's responsibility to run better, or do you think it's Zach Taylor's responsibility to call more run plays?
Probably some degree of both. Yeah, probably some degree of both. I don't think they're getting enough carries. I think that's real, too. I think he's probably trying to get it to him in the passing game a little too often, as opposed to just coming out and hammering the ball and letting that develop a play-action game for Burrow, which will be much easier because guys will be more open.
Yeah, I just think that, sometimes you have games like this. You're on the road. I mean, even to veteran teams that are used to having success, sometimes you just get caught slipping. And this is not always the worst thing that can happen, because what happens when you lose to a team like that, the organization, the team kind of panics a little bit. So now you got the coaches bring you in, watching a little extra tape, and that's a good thing, because what it does is it's a wake-up call. It wakes you up and makes you understand that, hey, we can't take anyone for granted, because just like you said, We're capable of beating anybody, but we're also capable of losing to someone.
Yeah, and it could end up being the perfect thing, too, because if you're Cincinnati, you would much rather lose to the Jets and come beat the Browns as opposed to beat the Jets and come lose to the Browns next weekend. So it's a big game against Cleveland. Hopefully they are mad going into it. Let's get to your fifth takeaway, which is the Browns. You're saying the Browns got to somehow just become a group that's as one, because right now they're beat up, they're banged up, and they're losing, Rodney.
Yeah, the Browns, that's the most important thing. Everybody's going to, from the outside, everyone's going to say this and that about the Browns. The most important opinion is, what do they think about themselves, sticking together as a team and not answering questions about other people. In Odell Beckham's situation, hey, I thought they should have traded him. Kevin Stefanski has to do a better job of getting him involved. Like, what are you doing, Kevin? Like, I was on national television last year every single week talking about Kevin Stefanski should be the coach of the year, should be the coach of the year. And you got a talent like Odell Beckham, you have to get him the ball. Jet sweeps, whatever it is, quick passes, screens. Get him the ball. Take a few shots with him. Get him more involved in the game. It's too much talent sitting on the bench and not getting production from Odell Beckham.
You know, truthfully, Rod, I think they wanted to. I think they wanted to get rid of him. I don't think there's a team out there that wants him. I really don't. Like, they don't want him bad enough to go make a legitimate offer to the Browns. That's what I think. He's making too much money for the headache that he can be. And then you got all this stuff with his dad's posting these clips on YouTube, and it's real. I mean, he's been open. We've been talking about this since about week 2. He is open, and he's not getting the ball. That's real, 100%. So Odell Beckham Jr.'s dad has got a point. Now, is this going to help the chemistry? No. I will say, too, Rodney, when we had that interview, what was it, maybe the preseason game or something, where we interviewed Baker Mayfield on the field right after the game, and we asked him about Odell Beckham Jr., there was some temperature about that answer. When I asked, how do you successfully reinsert Odell Beckham Jr. into this offense, there was something weird about that answer where I was going, it's not a number one priority. And he's been back and healthy, and it has been far from a number one priority. So I'm right there with you. Move him if you're not going to use him, but I don't think the market was that vast, to be honest.
When I look at a guy like Jarvis Landry, and I'm so sick of hearing people jump on Jarvis Landry. Like Jarvis Landry, he's been their emotional leader. He's been one of their best players since he's been in Cleveland. And this guy's been reliable. He's been tough. He doesn't mind blocking. He goes down there and blocks outside linebackers. You never hear Jarvis Landry complain about anything. So people, who's ever talking trash about him, yeah, he had a bad game. He had a few drops. But I guarantee you this, he'll show up next week. I know Jarvis Landry. He will show up next week. He's one of the toughest players, if not the toughest player on their team. Another guy I just want to give props to is Myles Garrett. He is balling out. Now we need to start inserting his name in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year because he's balling.
That's a great point. Right up there with Max Crosby. He is right there in that conversation. Biggest story at the Browns is that they are just hurt at so many positions, including quarterback, as Baker's battling through that left shoulder injury.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.